Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Relative Pitch. Today, we're so excited to have okay, Dr. Chandler L. Wilson. Okay, he is the Assistant Director of Athletic Bands and Assistant Professor of Music Education at Florida State University. Also, big composer, big just music educator, all the big titles in the world. So we are just so thankful to be in his presence today. Hey Chandler, how are you?
Good afternoon. It's a very heavy introduction, but excited to be here with you all and to chat a bit. So thank you all for the invite.
Yeah, thank you for coming. So, well, Chandler, tell us you are at the Florida State. So how did you get to where you are? Where are you from and what did you do?
Wow, it's a journey that happened somehow, some way. If I can tell you that I thought this is where I would be, definitely wasn't the case. I'm from Miami, Florida, so I was born and raised in Miami, Florida, and did all my schooling there from K through 12. I went from there to Florida A&M University, FAMU, historically black college and university in Tallahassee, Florida. For my undergraduate program, I originally started off as a computer graphics major and took a whole lot of turns and stuff like that, and ended up becoming a music major at some point and had a great time there, involved in the Marching 100 and a lot of the other programs that we have with our wind ensemble and chamber ensembles and things like that. I've had a great time at FAMU. After I graduated there, I taught in Hollywood, Florida at Hollywood Hills High School. So had a fantastic time there with that program. Spent 4 years there, and then had some folks that asked questions about, have you ever thought about getting your master's degree? And I was kind of fighting it off for a while, and decided to entertain it, and ended up at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, where I got my master's in conducting with Jack Stamp, and phenomenal composer and conductor, which it kind of worked out because it was similar to, I think, what I wanted to do in life. And then went back to teach in the same area, Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood, Florida, at a school called Cooper City High School, which is actually on the same street as my first job, just a mile west. So it was very unique, and spent 2 years there, and then got a call about possibly auditioning for a PhD at Florida State University, and did the thing. Went there and got the degree, and spent 3 years in Tallahassee, and graduated in 2019 with my doctorate in music education with an emphasis in conducting. From there, I went to Eastern Michigan, in Ypsilanti, Michigan, for a year. Absolutely had a great time. Beautiful place, right in between Ann Arbor and Detroit. So a whole bunch of culture to experience there. Plus the snow. That's another experience.
Love
In
snow.
you know, Pennsylvania was one thing. Michigan, that's a whole nother difference. But experienced that, and then the position at Florida State opened up, and talked to my wife about it and applied, and was lucky enough to get the position. So I've been here now for 3 years. Completed my third year here at Florida State University, and it's been a great journey so far.
Oh my gosh, I feel like you've literally been so many places and things. So well, first I want to go back some. You had a interesting path to get into music. Like you didn't start, the common, oh, I started first day was a music major. You were all the way in another building and completely in a different pathway. So what was like your original mindset? I'm gonna go do this instead of music. What was that like?
Well, I was huge into computers in high school. The high school I went to, Miami Central Senior High School, you know how they have magnet programs in all the inner city schools.
Yeah.
So I grew up in an area called Carroll City, but I went to Central, which is in Liberty City, just about 30, 40 minutes apart. But Central had a computer magnet program, and I was able to get into the computer magnet program, and there I started to develop a liking for digital graphics. So like doing 3D videos and images and stuff like that, and it became something I really enjoyed doing. And when I got to Florida A&M University, in the journalism department, it was under there, and at that time, right, if I remember correctly, because we talk about 2 decades now, I believe it was shared with Florida State University, and I've always had a love for Florida State. Deion Sanders put me on Florida State, and I've been a Florida State fan ever since. So even our house is Miami, I was Florida State, so that one game every year is always very intense. My mom still calls me now, like week to get like the actual week of the game. But yeah, I wanted to do computers, and I kind of worked my way around. And I think ultimately I was probably trying to do everything but teach. That's really what I think my brain was doing. So I switched from there, and I went to ancient history. And then from ancient history, I went to like physical therapy. I was like all over the place.
Oh
And
wow.
my junior year, we were in practice at FAM, and part of my scholarship was to be in applied lessons, to take theory, and be in all the ensembles as a part of the scholarship. So I had a chance to get to know a lot of the professors in the Department of Music. And Dr. White asked me one day during a break. He said, "Chandler, you're not a music major?" I was like, "No, doc." And he was like, "But you're this and you're that, and you do this in the band and you play this. We're here, but you're not a music major." I was like, "No." He was like, "Come to my office tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock." And in college, 8 o'clock in the morning is just off limits.
Right.
So, I did as told, and I showed up at 8 o'clock, and it was like one of those old intervention. I mean, one of those old intervention TV shows where you walk in a room and it's just people. And that's kind of what it was. I walked in, and it was our theory professor, it was some of our applied professors, some of the directors, and they were like, "Hey, we really think you need to consider music." And 15, 20 minutes later, I walked out with a change of major form, and I tried to complete everything I can and as quickly as I could. So it ended up taking me 6 years to graduate, because I started, like I said, about middle of my I think I made that change right at the beginning of my junior year. So made a change there, and that's kind of how I landed. So I think I was just trying to avoid teaching.
Hmm.
Not sure why, but maybe it's just the mindset of a 20-year-old.
Right. I mean, did you have like family members who were teachers, or did you just was like teaching is not what I want to do?
Uh yeah, my mom's a teacher, or she was a guidance counselor. My grandma was a teacher. I have a whole lot of aunties that are teachers. Some of them became teachers later on in life. I think I like to play, and music was one thing that was the most consistent for me, and I enjoyed it. But I don't know if I wanted to do it for a living.
Mhm.
And but yeah, teaching, maybe it was that too. But yeah, I grew up in the school, so I was maybe trying to find another way around it, but that was just my fault.
No,
Yeah.
it's interesting because we talk a lot about career paths because not all, like all of us here have we've gone through something and had a switch or change trajectories at some point here on Relative Pitch, and we always talk about how it feels so quick as an undergraduate where you have to decide what you want to do for the rest of your life, and it seems so odd to these 17, 18-year olds to be like, you decide now like what you're going to stick to, and to expect them to
Mhm.
expect 100% percentage of everyone to stick with that. I think it should be more encouraged, honestly, to do what you kind of did yourself without even it doesn't sound like you were prompted to do it. Be like, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try this, I tried this, I tried this. And you're not, what I love about it is you're not talking about anything necessarily negative. You're seeing all this as leading up to where you currently are. And so now, being on the other side where you are an educator, have you been able to kind of give advice to your own students who may be feeling that same like loss or disconnection with what they want to do?
Yeah, a lot of times when I meet somebody that may be coming to our university or any university in general, and they're like, "Hey, I'm thinking about majoring in this," or that's one of the first questions I ask. "Hey, I'm going to school. Great. What do you think about majoring in?" When they say, "Well, I don't know," I say, "Perfect." And it's weird because like the parents are kind of look be like, "What?" It's like, "Yeah," I said, "This is a place where you just kind of figure it out." There's no time limit on college, and that's something I speak to our students about, or those that come in and we have some one-on-one conversations. Is sometimes we get locked in that pressure of trying to finish at a certain time, especially in music, because they get there and it's like, you know, I'm I'm going to intern the fall of my fifth year, and now I'm gonna be behind. It's like, no, you're not. your path was just different. You took different classes. Your weight load was different. Somebody might have just like bulked up on a bunch of classes. For you, you needed to work, or you needed to find a way to have some mental relief, and you didn't want to have to take all these classes. So, college doesn't have an expiration date. Granted, you don't want the soda to go flat
Right.
at some point. You want to be there too long. But yeah, whenever you get in and you experience what you want, or if you want a double major, that's a question we get a lot of times. Like, I want to major in this and this. It's your life. Nobody can really tell you no. All they can do is say, well, maybe here are some things to consider because of the workload. But if you're willing to tackle it, then it's your job to do it. So we do get a chance to talk about that often and just encourage them to figure out their own paths.
Mm-hmm.
I recently had a prospective student talk to me. She wanted to be something to do with legislation, like an ambassador and something like that. But she loves music. I'm like, hey, there's not enough of you. You could do a double major. You can even do a minor, and you could just do this thing in government where there's not a lot of musicians I know of, and have that music background, so you can fight for us.
Mhm.
So we ain't got to be fighting by ourselves. And so she's considering a double major or a major and a minor and combining those two things. And people are like, well, you have to choose one thing going into college. And a lot of students are like, well, my band director told me to be a music ed major because that's what he did. And I was like, okay, is that what you want to do? Like, have you ever sat in a classroom for 8-9 hours a day and taught kids? No, you might want to go do that. Like, just observe one day and see if your headache is too strong at the end of the day. Or if it's just the right amount.
That is so true. And actually, if you want to, there's a young lady that just finished a degree here at Florida State because we're in the capital of our city, and she got her degree. She had a BA in music and flute performance, I believe, and now also is in her master's for I think political science, and
That's
does
cool.
work at the Capitol building. So that's a great reference if they're interested in kind of speaking
Oh,
to
yeah.
somebody that's done something like that.
I love how, when you were in school, you had the option to do things. I mean, I was reading like you were arranging at such a young age. I saw that FAMU literally chose you to arrange some of their things. And it's funny hearing you say, oh yeah, I started doing this and I tried my best not to fall in this lane, but I'm like, it was calling you so loudly, so loudly. So I mean, how do you even get to be chosen as like one of the FAMU's arrangers? I mean, everybody knows FAMU's arrangement. So yeah, come on.
Oof, that's humbling. Yeah, I had I'll be honest, I think I had a bit of an advantage. My high school was very similar to FAMU, and actually FAMU's current director, Dr. Chipman, was the director at that high school.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I had him for like 2 months before he left to go to FAMU.
Wow.
And so as far as the music that we played and things like that, it was a head start on kind of hearing what the FAMU sound was. And some friends and I, were dating ourselves a little bit here. When we were trying to do new stuff in the stands or a new halftime show, we had to like dub the tape and then get the tape across town to somebody to arrange it. There was no emails or here's YouTube and go to minute,
Yeah.
blank. So when we started wanting stuff really quick, some friends and I were like, hey, let's just kind of figure out how to write it. So about 10th grade, we started arranging for our high school band, and it was a real life scenario. There's some times where I would write stuff, and the trumpet players be like, "Hey, Chandler, nope, can't do that. Like this is not a good idea," type thing. Or I would start to study some of the study some of the stuff that we would play that FAMU played. So I'll look how Sarge would orchestrate the trombones or how he'll play the horns. And when I got to FAMU, I think it was 2004. We had opportunity to arrange something simple. It was like ESPN or something like that, and it kind of opened the door because FAMU is very selective, and Mr. Sargent is very selective with the folks. I mean, granted, people they'll go in and Sargent always listen. We're always willing to play something. And that kind of opened the door. And then 2005, we played Tennessee State, and we did a jamboree, and we needed a whole bunch of new stuff, and it opened the door and opportunity to do it. So myself and a couple of friends, we started writing out a whole bunch of things, and the history from there is kind of there. So I've been blessed to have a lot of pieces played or arranged for FAMU during the days, and it's been a while though. It's been a little bit over a decade since I've done one. Life's just been a little different, and we get tired and we get busy, and then you pass that down to somebody else getting that chance to do that. But no, it was a good blessing, opportunity, and Sarge having trust in me and also teaching. So he'll sit down and say, "How about you try to voice it this way? Here's a different way to look at it." So being willing to learn as well was a big part of it.
So, fun facts for anybody that's listening. The ESPN that Chandler's talking about is honestly my favorite ESPN arrangement. I used to play it at my high school. I gave it to my students, and it was always just my favorite thing to listen to. I take it everywhere I go. It's mine. And the thing is, until you literally just said it, like I remember seeing ESPN arranged by Chandler Wilson, but until you just said that, it finally clicked that here it is. I just want to let you know
Oh,
that ESPN arrangement is literally my favorite arrangement of that song. Okay, and it's going
thank,
everywhere.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And so I'm guessing that that experience and that opportunity led you on to becoming a full-fledged composer. Like now you are a full-fledged composer. How what was the way for that?
Yeah, it helped significantly with transposition. That helped really early. So the fact that we were writing stuff and we were transposing it on the spot, it's not something we had to learn on the back ends because we learned it, from that lens. And composition kind of happened. We were in theory, and we started working on harmonic minor scales. And I'm a huge fan of Egypt and the Middle East and stuff like that. And the movie The Mummy just came out like a year beforehand, and all I could hear is that type thing. And once we started writing the scale, I mean, working on the scale, I was like, I wonder if I can write a whole piece with this scale, and that ended up being my first composition. It's a piece called Elements, and it was premiered at Florida State University by a community band. I would have been maybe a junior in college, I think, at that time, and it opened the door. So it kind of helped when it again going to range and scoring and stuff like that. There were some hard parts to realize everything can't be scored like marching band or orchestrated that way. So those I've kind of had to learn, and I learned that from the podium. So when I'm studying people's scores, I can look and see what Alfred Reed does compared to John Mackey, compared to Julie Giroux, compared to such and such, and getting a chance to see how they get certain sounds and timbres out is one of those things that helps too. So in any part of our profession, we kind of not necessarily steal, but we borrow because we hear something and we kind of say, "Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Let me just try to put my own twist on it." And getting a chance to conduct some great ensembles also has helped with that too.
Yeah. hmm And um because I've heard your pieces and I was like, yeah, this is really great and it's really amazing. And it's also great teaching. And it's when I look at scores, I can always tell who's, done teaching because it's usually scored very well for students to comprehend and all of that. So when you were teaching, how was that composing going? Was that inspiration for you to be like, okay, let me write this because I know how high school students or middle school students are? What was that experience like?
It definitely curved my energy when it came to writing. Because if you hear that first piece and then like the next piece I wrote after that, I think it's a piece called A Hero's Journey. But it's hard. So in my brain, I'm writing what I can physically play. And when I started teaching, I realized that my students could not play that. So it's like, okay, how do I write stuff that's more accessible to the masses? Because granted, we all have pieces that are very difficult and only a select group can play.
Mhm.
And then we have those pieces that everybody or a larger network of places can perform, and that started to kind of curb the way that I started to compose. So
Mhm.
looking at things range wise, difficult, the level of difficulty, how long you have the trumpet players playing. Like that's really important because they can't. They no. If you got them playing for 200 measures, good luck. So it's kind of you have to know some of those things by seeing those opportunities, for sure. But it helped me curve, and then my students at every program I've had have always been a part of the process. So if I'm working on something, it's like, hey, can y'all read this for me? Tell me what y'all think. I've even let them name pieces before, because they're part of the whole journey. And if I know if I can get them to play it, then maybe it'll work for a good level 3, a level 4. And I do my best also to try to make it as educationally friendly as possible. There's some pieces I'll write that are for professional groups that's built for different different things, but there's a lot of things in our standard education music that I'll leave the window open for the composer to do something. So sometimes the publisher say, hey, do you want to put something more specific here? And I'm like, no, because it'll be up to the director to decide what they want to do.
Right.
And here's a teaching tool, here's a way to kind of go and things like that. So I think that's really important because we want the students to have a great time, and we want them to find it as a challenge but also enjoy the challenge as well.
So this all kind of like you were arranging, composing, teaching, and that all led you to go study with Jack Stamp, right?
Yes, somebody asked. I was actually looking at another graduate school, and somebody that performs in the community band that I was the assistant conductor for asked me one day and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about going to Indiana University of Pennsylvania?" And the first thing I said was, "What and who and where is that? Never heard of it." The damn and they were like, "Oh, well, that's where Jack Stamp is." And I'm like, "Well, I respect Dr. Stamp, but I don't want to be a composer for a living. It's like I like to do it on the side. I'd rather, conduct, teach." And she was like, "Well, that's what he does. His degrees are in conducting. He's a director of bands, but he also composes." And I looked him up and sent him an email. And literally, like the next week, I was on the plane to Pennsylvania to audition. So it kind of happened that way because of that structure and writing while teaching and having ensembles and stuff like that. So it definitely helped lead me to IUP.
And you did a little bit of both while you were there, or did you mainly focus on the conducting and teaching aspect?
It was mainly conducting, and but my thesis is a composition. I took comp lessons. Dr. Stamp and we would have conversations about composition if we wanted to, but we kept everything basically, conducting based. But if I showed him a piece, he'll say, "Hey, so how about you think about changing keys here?" And of course, if you know him, he doesn't stay in one key center or a measure. So so if something's a little stretched out, but he opened my mind to being, hey, maybe you need to find different ways to get around things. So we would have some conversations about composition, but the bulk of it was mainly conducting, though.
Okay.
It sounds like you've had a very well thought out, but like not even just like everything happened exactly as you planned, but a very well flowing education to your career and various aspects of your career. I'm curious as to, with having the different elements of your conductor, your composer, arranger, and educator, what challenges have you gone through and overcome to find that balance? And obviously, you are a human as well. You're a person, so you're going through like actual changes and growth. So what are the things that you encountered throughout this journey?
Wow, that's a deep, heavy question. It's a good one too, because it makes you think. Um, I think one of the parts of the journey that is hard is leaving something to go somewhere else, and that is very tough. To leave my first high school job, to see the program we started with like 24 kids, we ended like 160, and we were doing so many things, but to leave that was tough. Grad school was a little easier because you kind of know it's temporary. You go in and you get out. And then the second program was the same thing. IUP, same thing. Eastern Michigan, same thing. And it's been a little tough in those transitions because you have to let go of something, and that makes it hard. Really, 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 really hard to do. Growing up, got married, have kids now, so that also makes a thing too because it takes a lot of your time. So when you're younger, you have the energy to do a lot of this. Still having the energy now is great, but the time is not the same. So, if you're, arranging for X amount of high school or college bands, then that time frame has to change because you can't lock yourself in a room for 12 hours for 5 days. Because when 4:30 kicks in and it's daddy time, then daddy time is what's important. So now you have to be a little bit more picky on the things that you do. Saying no to some projects has been hard because you just want to help people as much as you can. And sometimes you have to say, no, I just can't do it right now because I have to balance out my life the best that I can. And one thing that we learned in this profession that we are still trying to figure out is balance. We can find a way to balance a chord, but the balance, what happens between waking up and going to sleep is still hard. So, balance is still way off. It's twisted and so it's a continued struggle. Uh, but it's a good struggle, but it's a struggle that I think we kind of expect, and hopefully one day somebody will figure it out and tell us, but I don't think that's going to happen though.
No, I love that because I think too often when we say balance and we talk about balance, everyone thinks that every day that means it's a balance of 10% this, 5% this, and that it's no. Some days a balance is 0% most of this, like 90% this one thing that you're ultimately focusing on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it depends because we're different every time we wake up. There's different priorities and we have different things and people to see that day, different places we got to be, different things that are just coming up. And so I love this idea that there's not like we find the balance and it just is, but it's like every day you are searching for what that balance is and what it should look like that day. I also love the fact that you talked about, and this might be something that Anthony would know more about, but the idea of like when do you know it's the right time to leave your where you are, and how to go, like how to not think about the heartache that may come with that as like, am I doing the wrong thing, like how, like especially with first time teachers who have a program that they really did maybe bring from nothing to something, and it's time for them to move on. How do you make that decision?
It is tough. I think it's individually based because in your situation where you are financially where you are, it's one of those things. Somebody did mention once, like, if you do go to school, make sure that you get something for it. If you go get your master's or you get your doctorate, try to get, like, school needs to be free, or like, you're not coming out of pocket as much because, teaching, we don't make a lot of money anyway. So you're going to go spend more money to have no money. It's kind of one of those things to keep in mind. But it depends on what you are seeking. So for me, and everybody's story is different. So one thing we can do is tell our own personal story. Is I looked at getting a master's degree because of a friend of mine. His name is Edric Rhodes. He's now the arts and curriculum director at the Kennedy Center in DC. And we were walking around Midwest, and he's kind of like a bigger brother, mentor type thing. And he said, "Hey, have you ever thought about going to grad school?" And this, I think, my third year teaching. I was like, "No." He said, "Just go to that booth right there and just go and talk to him." And it was Kansas State University. So I was like, okay. I went. I talked to the people at Kansas State University. Happened to be some grad students there. I left with a little folder. And what happened is when I went back to my hotel room that night, I found myself looking up everything on Kansas State University. Because I started to look and see, well, what are the possibilities? What are the things? And it happened for me just through somebody else's idea. Like, hey, how about you look at, you're doing some good stuff. How about you find a way to get better at it? And because of that, it opened my eyes. If not, I probably would have never looked at it. It wasn't on my mind. It wasn't on my radar at all. Sometimes we fall into this thing now, which is a new circle, where people they teach for like a year or two, and it's like, great, I want to go to grad school. Doesn't work like that. I mean, it does in some cases, but you want to find your own niche. And it's kind of hard to not be told to do something different or try something different if you haven't figured out what is your thing first. So, if you teach for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, you start to create habits. And then those habits are the things where you go to school and somebody say, yes, that's great, or how about you try it this way? But when you're still, in conducting 101 and you just 365 days removed, then you haven't really figured anything out yet. Sometimes. So I think the patience game is one of the things that's hard to do. But I think you'll know when you're ready. There's some goal to, be better at your craft. Then I think that is, at least for me, when it's time, when you feel like, hey, I'm good, but I need to get better. How do I get better? And I think that's a good place when you start to mentally think about some of those things.
Mm. Yeah, because I think especially when you're teaching, you go into habits. Like my process was always, get the bachelor's degree, go teach, and then while you're in that, apply what you've learned from the bachelor's degree. And then you're like, okay, well, I still don't know this. Where can I go get the information? All right, let's go get the next degree and then go apply that. So it's all about application of what you learn and see what you don't know. Because I sometimes I think we let educators go out into the field with no net. Now I will say Florida State, because y'all are big and y'all got a full big net going on down there. Um, but even then, I'm pretty sure there are some that are like, I feel like I am drowning. I feel like I can't turn left or right. And just ask somebody, okay, this clarinet broke this. How do I fix this? If we could provide some type of net for that in this education realm, I think it would be a lot better. But definitely going back to getting more experience, more education before, going on to that degree would be the best way for that.
And I think what's cool is, um, with that net is also, uh, teaching them how to fish, right? So you also have to know when you don't know something, how do you go figure it out?
Right.
And sometimes it's reaching out to other people. So that same guy I mentioned, Edric Rhodes. Edric worked at a school, West Boca High School, and he had the best horn section I've ever heard in my life. And I'm like, I need my horns to sound like yours. I just needed my program to be like his. I modeled every band I had after his.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, because his students were phenomenal. His marching band was great. He had a competitive program, but in the stands, they were just jamming, but then they could do their other thing on the field. And he had three concert bands that were playing their butts off, two jazz bands, and his students were normal. I hate to say that when you say it that way. Because sometimes you get kids that are like overly band.
Yeah.
His students were just normal. Like they had a break, they're playing hacky sack outside, and they don't walk like machines because they march a certain way. And it was like, man, they were just normal. I said, how do I create what you have? And that's something that we just have to naturally do because you can also get education by watching other people. But sometimes we think that we have to jump so quickly somewhere else. It's like, sometimes education is right next door. You just have to get out your four walls and do it, and I think that's just, something that has to kind of be put out there too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So one thing that we like to talk about on here is representation. And so it seems like going to FAMU and you went back to teach and everything, you were a strong representation. You had good representation of musicians and composers and arrangers who looked like you. How important is that to you now as an educator and a person that you're teaching future music educators about representation and getting out of that little stereotypical box of what a musician might look like from 50 years ago?
Wow.
Mhm.
Oh man. We can talk on that for hours. Uh, the thing that's interesting about representation is you ask it in a great way. From you see it on one end, right? When you're growing up in a predominantly black situation. So that's kind of all that we knew. We grew up, everybody was black. The school was 99% black. You go to FAMU, it was black.
Yeah.
And then there's some times when you realize outside of that bubble, there's just not a lot. And that was kind of mind blowing a bit. And there are two moments in life where I think my brain started to figure out some things. One of them, I was at a conducting symposium about 10 years ago now, and it was about 70 people in a symposium. And it took like 2 days for me to realize I was the only person in there that was black or of any other color. And I was like, okay, so why am I the only one? And then the questions start happening. Well, does everybody know about it? How can they get here? So many other things because it's about exposure. And then my first national CBDNA was actually probably that same year. And I got there and I was like, okay, where are we? We're just not there. And, I ran into Roby George, who was at Indiana State at the time. And I latched on to Roby. And next thing you know, I'm with Rodney Dorsey and Ricky Fleming and Rodesta Brandon. I was like, great. Here's the people I need to be with. But again, it was just a few of us. And like this year at CBDNA National, you got a chance to see. We all here. Like everybody's here. It's like let's, try to get a chance to be around it. But the reason why I said I think it's important or difficult with, well, I guess the other side of representation now is we are that representation for that student that is at that school. And say, okay, if Dr. or Mr. or Mrs. So and so got there, maybe I can get there too. And the part that's difficult about it is we can't mess up.
Mhm.
That's the part I think is the biggest struggle because every time we walk into somewhere, there's an expectation for the students that you're in front of because they might have never had somebody that looks like you or talks like you or use a certain language or slang. I remember when I first got to Florida State, I started saying some things. The kids were like, huh? I was like, oh, that means this. Sorry. Because it's just the Miami and me saying certain things that we would naturally get. And but it's really important to see it because then that student can say, yes, I know somebody if they have questions and somebody else may have a question about, representation or different life scenarios. And we were just talking about students and Lauren was mentioning this about different areas and kind of things like that is you know we have an advantage growing up in that situation because when that's our first job, we're used to it. So when your first job is like what you grew up with, it's not as much of a struggle because it's like, okay, I know what to do. We've done this before. We've been around this rodeo. It's been a little minute. But the fact that the students now know they have somebody that has been through that situation that's teaching them also is important to them now too. And granted, it doesn't have to be somebody of color. It could be just somebody of any other place. If you're from the Midwest and they're from, Maine, then you get a chance to say, hey, I'm moving up to the Northeast. Tell me some things. And it's just as diverse as it can be. But I think the part that's really difficult now is just being the greatest example that we can be, and just continuing to be ourselves, which is really important.
No, there's so much, so many things in that my brain went ping, ping, bookmark that, bookmark that. And then the main thing that you mentioned that has been, I think, kind of being discussed more is this idea of like, there's a weight that comes with representation, especially when you are the one who's the representative that, and when you are the only one in the room, or if you're the one who you reflect what your students, they see themselves in you, it's like this responsibility that you feel naturally of I have to be 100% every single day because that is what they're expecting of me, looking up to me. But then also other people who may be praying for your downfall are also waiting for that one moment where you slip up and you're aware of that. And so it's like you almost can't be, it's this whole discourse that was going on Twitter of like, sometimes like this whole black excellence thing, like where's the black, like we can be mediocre or can we just be okay? Like why is it always like we have to be above and beyond? And it's like it's because of the representation issue. If you're the only one in the room, you are representing every single, it's like unfortunately it is monolithic at that point where you are the one example. And that's not talked about enough. That's why when people, all these DEI or DEIA initiatives that are happening, it's like when you are putting people in those situations, you have to realize the burden and the weight that comes with that as well.
It is, and some of it is if you have a good network, which is a big plus. So, one of the things I'm also blessed with is that when I first started getting into like the higher education stuff, I received calls from certain people like Greg Drain at Penn State and say, "Hey, listen, let's talk." Because you got people that have been through it and they're kind of, helping you, throughout that grind. And, having a network is really important because there you can be mediocre. You can be like, look, man, I'm struggling. Like, what do I need to do? I can't figure it out. And if you have that, network, that definitely helps sometimes to have people that you can just talk to and vent to. And the weight. The last thing I'll say about this is like the weight. It's man, it can be heavy until like, or at least in my experience, like I just go and this it's I've been, I guess, comfortable that way. Like I just go, I walk into a room and we're going to just make the best of whatever it is. But until somebody points it out, sometimes it's hard. And somebody came into our office the other day and they were looking at all the pictures on the wall and they said, "So how does it feel?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" They said, "You're the only person." It's like 35 pictures on our wall of directors that have been through Florida State. He said, "You're the only person here." And like it just hit me. I was like, "Oh man, okay."
Mm.
That's a different set of weight. You're one out of 40. I mean, it's like a different number, but sometimes I think, we don't see it at the same time, but when it's kind of exposed as that way, then I think, it makes it really more realistic than anything too.
Yeah, because I think I had the same experience as you, at a symposium where there's many people and you just turn around and you're like, wait, oh, I am. And I don't think it hit me until probably day two, day three, where, everybody's gone and things like that. And then you really realize, like, wait, I am. And I think there should be a study of us, how many of us really just go into a room, we're going to do what we do, we are going to make things better, we're going to just do what we do naturally. And then I think reality set, it's kind of like adrenaline. I think I'm gonna call it black adrenaline is what we have, or just people of color adrenaline, because we go in, we just do what we do, and it's not until another outside factor is like, wait, pause, look at all of this, and then
Hmm.
you really realize of like, oh wow, I see, I
Yeah.
see. And then at CBDNA, I mean, you see it like you see it how the number is small but the number is growing. That is
Yes.
the beautiful thing about it. The number is growing, and the reception, or I would say the people that are, the room is opening for all of us in a good way. Maybe slow, it may be slow, but it is opening. So I'm just glad that some doors are opening, and it's becoming more welcoming for all of us to be included in that. So
Agreed. And platforms like this definitely help, and bravo to you three for getting this out there and just having this real life conversations. Because sometimes, again, it's just exposure. So, somebody won't know that, symposiums exist. Because, for example, that's something we didn't know existed until I was in my master's program. So, you telling me there's some place I can go every summer and learn how to conduct better? It's like, we just didn't know. It just wasn't a part of you know, um, a part of what we were put in front of quite often, and making sure that we are exposing, us to everything and everything to us at the same time is what's needed because exposure works both ways. So if they know there's a possibility to maybe attend a certain university or possible to just reach out to the local conductor or flute professor or trumpet professor, in your local college, just like it's okay to just call them or contact them or things like that. So as long as we continue to expose everybody to everything, or as much as we can, because you can't expose everything, but expose as much as you can, then at least it's more knowledge for people to say, okay, at least let me look at it and pay it some attention or learn more about it. And I think that always helps.
mhm, mhm.
Well, it's like there's a couple of summer camps now, like for college
Mhm.
age kids that are waiving their application fee.
Mhm.
They want that to be one less barrier. They're like, if you're going to pay to come here, why are you paying to apply? Like, why? But if it's not going to go to your, yeah. So why are you doing that? And I'm like, I just forget sometimes. And this year, because there was some of my kids were like, I don't want to do drum corps. What else can I do? And I was like, there's a lot of stuff. Why have I never just thought about telling you this? Because it's in high school, it's always drum corps or nothing. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, let's give them something else. There's like this middle ground, but it's like hard. The camps that I knew of at the time was like, I don't want you wasting a bunch of money to go to Interlochen. Like you don't want to drop that much right now. You're a sophomore in high school.
Mhm.
Like, let's get you a camp in the state or around the state. Don't travel 12 hours, drop like $5,000, and then come back. And maybe it wasn't the best time of your life. And so
Wow.
like now doing the research and making sure like, okay, this is the camps the middle schoolers can go to that I teach. Here are the camps the high schoolers, and here are the camps for the college. It just was never a thing until they were like, hey, I really don't want to do this drum corps thing. What can I do? Play trumpet? I don't know. So I had to be fast on the internet that night.
Yeah, well, the summer camps are big, and again, I think the exposure works that way. Where if you get a couple of students that attend the camp and they have a great time, then the following year more people will go, and then the next year more people will go, and then in turn your program just get better because as your students come back and they come back energized with more music and let me show you what I've learned. But it's being exposed to knowing that hey, every state there's stuff everywhere. We just have to know where to look for it. We just kind of know what we know and not
Yeah.
necessarily know what we don't know. So I'm getting really philosophical about stuff like that, but yeah, because it's like TV shows. Excuse me. Like I have a colleague. We were talking about a TV show, and it was The Office. Oh yeah, The Office. Blah blah blah. And I was like, never seen the episode. And he was like, "What?" I was like, "No." I said, "Question: Have you seen Moesha?" He was like, "No." I said, "Okay, we're just in two different places." Because I wasn't exposed to The Office. Now it
Yeah,
looks like a great show. It's not like I wouldn't watch it. I just didn't know about it.
right.
Or Game of Thrones because I couldn't afford HBO. So therefore, yeah, this is not my thing. So I mean, it is. I kind of like it, but yeah, it's just exposure. I think so. Sometimes you're just exposed to what's around you, and that's a part of our job as educators too. Is to sometimes bring the outside to
Yeah.
us, and that's as well as racial representation also. Hey, here's some things that we can do. Check out these things. At least let me give you the stuff to look at, and then you can make your decision from there.
It's all about just planting that seed, especially as a teacher, just giving just that one seed, and who knows what that student might go ahead and do with that. I know me being a teacher, I sometimes I'll just be saying things, and I don't know that students might take that, but they do, and then months later they've created something beautiful, and they're like, "Mr. Morris, this and this and this and this." And you said this, and I was like, I did. When did I say that? Is that on record? Because if it wasn't on record, I truly don't know. But you never know what it is that you might say or that you might do that might change somebody's life. So it goes back to that to the sentiment that we were talking about earlier about we never know how much weight we have because
Mhm.
it can be anything and it can be what you do or what you say. So, unfortunately, but fortunately, we have to make sure that we represent ourselves very well.
Agreed.
So, Chandler, it has been a pleasure having you on this episode. How can people stay in contact with you just in case they want to reach out or anything like that?
Oh, you can find me on most social platforms. I just downloaded TikTok the other day. I've been holding off for the longest, but Instagram Doc Wilson 84. Facebook, you can just find me Chandler Wilson, and then feel free to shoot me an email at clwilson at fsu.edu if I can ever help in any way or answer any questions or just be of service because that's why we do what we do. Is just to make sure that everybody can be comfortable that once they walk out their four walls of wherever they are, that they can be as successful as they can, and that's what's most important. So if I can help in any way, please feel free.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you, everyone. So please if you have any questions, please go follow Dr. Wilson and ask him all about it. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll leave all the links down below. So everybody, please have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next week. See ya. Bye.